Good evening, you're watching The Last Word. I'm Sanjana. 1 in 7 Indians is affected by a mental disorder. This is as per the latest paper published by the Indian Council of Medical Research in Lancet Psychiatry. Now, if those numbers weren't upsetting enough, what is also concerning is that the proportional contribution of mental disorders to the total disease burden in India has doubled. It's doubled since 1990. So that essentially means that at least 15% or 14.3 to be absolutely accurate of the population is suffering from mental disorder. So can we now continue to brush mental issues under the carpet? Don't we need to stop ridiculing those who seek therapy? Deem them sick, deem them mad. And more importantly, do our schools, do our families, our very constructs need to be more sensitive to what's truly going on inside all of our heads. Let me quickly introduce my guests that are joining us this evening. We have Dr. Saida Ruksheda, psychiatrist and psychotherapist of the Trellis Family Center, going to be joining us shortly. Shraddha Sidwani, clinical psychologist and psychotherapist. Anand Chulani, leading success coach. Aditi Govitrukar, psychologist, Lighthouse Counseling, also an actor. Ranjini Krishnaswamy, former principal of the Billabong High International School in Thane and the director of the Dosti Foundation Schools. Rajshri Daga, a homemaker and also somebody who has lived with a family who has in fact suffered a debilitating mental health. Thank you so much to all my panelists for joining us this evening. Let's quickly get right into it. Let me come to you first, Shraddha. One of the disturbing trends, of course, in this report is the increase, but also the prevalence of the disorders existing in a higher volume in some parts of the country. Now, particularly with this report, it shows that this is happening more in the south of India, but it's not like the north of India is void of it as well, because over there, there's a higher prevalence when it comes to adolescents, when it comes to children. So what are we doing wrong?
I think with regards to the statistics, I think maybe in the south of India, it's easily more reported. As we know that education is much higher in the south. So you could get cases of people coming in for help at a more easier space. You know, whether you start from schools, children, you talk about adults, we have more people coming in there. But I do not agree that in the North India, it is not as prevalent as you're saying. We've seen a lot of cases in the media currently.
So then would you say that perhaps there is hesitation, of course, when it comes to social taboo? That is one thing that,
right.
of course, that there is hesitation. But Ranjini Krishnaswamy, you know, then if there is, of course, the hesitation in social taboo, there is also the hesitation when it comes to other levels, when it comes to family, when it comes to education, when it comes to institutions. Because there also, it's not like mental health is normalized. It's not like it is treated at par with a physical illness.
Yes, I agree with you. Unfortunately, we tend to think that, oh, she's mad, or there's something. We must realize that it's just as simple as having a cough, cold, or influenza. And just as you treat those symptoms, I believe we need to treat these too. And unless society equates this as just another problem that needs to be dealt with, we're going to have this all the while. Because it's how people react to such problems that makes, you know, the other person respond to the issue. So I think that in schools, for example, we should make children aware that, yes, there is a problem and how are you going to deal with it. So sensitize children as well as the teachers, the family of the kids who are around them. I think this has fallen off.
We seem to be having some problem there with Ranjini, but we'll try and get back to her. She seems to be having some problem there with her mic. Rajshri Daga, yes. She's a homemaker who's also joining us this evening. Rajshri, you know, we have to laud, of course, your strength. Unfortunately, Rajshri lost her child, her son. He had a mental illness. And thank you so much for coming and joining us this evening, for sharing your experiences. I'm sure it's going to help so many of our viewers. I'm sure it's going to help all of us here. But as somebody who has dealt with someone who has had a mental illness in your house, as somebody, as a mother, really, where did you see the gaps with regards to treating that mental illness? Do you feel like perhaps the school could have done better? Perhaps just in general, our society and our entire construct, the way we all communicate, could have been a lot better?
I would first say the society, because we have been brought up in a conservative society, so we are not told that we speak about mental health. So it's just pushed under the rug always. So that is one thing that we have to come out of the closet and just speak about it. That's very important. And secondly, I would say people are drifting away. They are becoming lonely. Why not weave their children back into the system of dada and nanis, nanas, so that the board games come, there's a eye contact, there's family bonding, so people are not lonely. The apps are coming with games, which is not good, I feel. So the child is playing with someone, but he's online, so he should play as a family together. Where is it? So the loneliness is still there, even if he's on the games which are online, I suggest. So there has to be something done that the children do not fall in peer pressure and come back to the weave of the family.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's an elephant in the room and perhaps on all our phones that, perhaps we all need to address. Dr. Saida Ruksheda also joining us. So good evening to you and thank you so much for joining us this evening. Social media. Social media definitely does have, I would say, an extremely negative but also an extremely positive effect about how we talk about mental health, how we view mental health, or how we even perceive what's going on in our minds. Would you agree?
Yes, definitely. Like we famously say, the more communication technology that we have, the farther apart we are growing. But I think it's also fair to say that because of social media and so many young people, that's the largest demographic of our country, are on social media and get a lot of their information from it. So it could also be very, very beneficial. So the youth today, the young people today are far more aware of mental health than, let's say, their parents or their senior peers. But then again, at the same time, what are we using social media for? That's also something that can be really alarming. A lot of children, when they're using social media for awareness of mental health or even for motivational quotes, that's great, that's good. Having said that, when they see other people portraying like this larger than life, or they're forever happy and forever going places, and they feel that, okay, that's real, that's definitely a negative impact on their lives.
Okay, so Aditi, we've obviously talked about the hesitation of social taboo, which is known obviously, but perhaps there are other barriers that are involved. There are definitely barriers, things like costs, things like availability. So those also need to be considered, because let's remember that this is not something that is easily talked about, so hence not made as available, and also not particularly affordable for everybody who definitely want to seek it.
Well, to begin with, I think we need to start with the awareness that sometimes people are not, they don't even realize that there is something wrong with them and that is connected to their mind. Like a mind can fall sick. This concept itself is brand new. People are not aware of it. So when a person is extremely anxious or depressed or any other kind of moving away or deviating from the normal, that awareness is not there. They just feel, okay, I'll be okay in a few days. I just need to rest it out. Or, I have a little stress at work. I'll be fine. And they live with it for a long time, perhaps till it's too late. So that awareness needs to start. Yes, the availability of psychologists, psychiatrists in India is extremely low. So that number also needs to go up along with the awareness. And where cost is concerned, I don't think the cost in India is that high. I mean, the amount of time that a psychologist gives to a patient and the cost that there is, I think it is far lesser than anywhere in the world, and for the time given and the therapy that goes in, I don't agree with you when you come to say that it's expensive.
Okay, Dr. Saida, would you like to weigh in on that? Because I do believe that, of course, that costs definitely prove to be a problem, because, we can sit here.
To say something.
Yes, I'll just come to you.
Yes.
Because we can sit here in a television studio and even hesitatingly seek mental health therapy, we can seek therapy, but after that, there are the scores of population, the 1.3 billion, who are not necessarily watching news channels, who are not necessarily living in urban areas, but are still mentally unfit.
Well, like she said, that awareness is definitely one of the key factors. Because there's lack of awareness, people would not know when to go for help. And then there's the second barrier. That yes, we are, as India we are a low resource country, whether it's in terms of availability of trained, qualified, and competent professionals in mental health, and at the same time also access and affordability. There are some avenues of affordable mental health care, definitely, and but like I said, but we know that 80% of all health care is in the private sector. So yes, in that sense, yes, the cost definitely is prohibitive in a lot of sense, especially for talk therapy, especially for psychotherapies. And that cannot be overlooked or cannot be underestimated. Medications in terms of diagnosis and psychiatrists, they're available almost all across India. Of course, again, because there's uniformity of availability of personnel. So in an urban setup, when a busy doctor could see, let's say, a set number of patients, let's say maybe 20 to 30, at the same time, in a rural setup, it could go up to as high as 400, 500, and even in some small places, 700 per day. So clearly that availability of resources is not uniform, and that's a big challenge. Also, like I said, that because of the awareness, they don't know when to go. And when it's also interesting to know that if it's a man who needs mental health, they might reach a psychiatrist or a specialist much faster. And if it's a woman who requires mental health care, they might actually only just reach a family physician, if that at all.
Anand Chulani, you're a leading success coach. Do you see that, do you see the gender divide particularly? And also, more importantly, do you think that anything has changed in the last decade? Because yes, we're reaching the end of the year, so just in the way we're viewing mental health and approaching and talking about mental health, or is it all looking too grim? Because these figures are obviously showing, something, quite staggering since 1990.
I think a couple of things. I think first of all, when you look at gender, I think a human being is a human being. So whether they are a male or female, if they're mentally not fit or mentally not healthy, they're mentally not healthy or fit. And I think it's important we look at that. And I think the other thing is to remember is that we're looking at it, and I think it's been mentioned a few times now, as this stigma, as this thing that stops us, right? We all talk about success, for example. But to me, I love the fact that Glenn Maxwell, the Australian cricket player, publicly said, I'm taking a break from cricket to actually focus on my mental health. Ariman Birla, who's from a very prominent family here in India, cricket player himself, also went on social media recently and did the same thing, to say that actually taking the time out is actually valuable. Because in honoring your own mental health, you're actually respecting yourself. And we're in such a drive. I find people talk about the end of a decade, and we have such a limiting belief around time. And I find that quite interesting. I mean, one of the biggest things in India, I believe, is a belief that it's too late. I'm 20 years old, I'm 25 years old, it's too late to get that career, it's too late, I'm too old to get married, whatever it is, this too late belief that's there. And so we have a warped look at time because we have this sense of pressure, end of decade, oh my God, what's happened? But actually what's interesting is most people actually, when it comes to a year, we get really crazy. But in a decade, people can achieve a lot of things. But what's your focus? Is your focus to sprint or to run the marathon? But if your focus is that, then you have to make not just mental health, but mental fitness a key part of that. People talk about being our country, people here are mentally strong. We're quite a resilient country, but we're not a fit country. We're not mentally fit. We're not able to, I can be strong in my bicep, but that doesn't mean I'm fit on the field. And it's the same thing with your mind. You have to be able to know when a situation comes, how do I handle that? Not about being responsible. How do I respond to things? That's the determination how mentally fit I am.
So then would you say, Rajshri, that a lot of that has to do with the way we raise our children, with what we're teaching them in schools, that they have to strive to be the best. Let's remember that that's ingrained in all of us. As South Asians and Indians, you're told and taught that you have to be the best at everything. Why an A plus? Why a 99.9? Why not 100? So do you think that is still prevalent, or perhaps educational institutions, families, society are kind of pulling back and saying, okay, find your thing, do what you have to?
Yes, yes, it has reduced a lot. It has reduced a lot, definitely. I would like to say that how we have successfully eradicated polio, because we see it at every station booth. So why not I open a door just to a politician asking for votes, or a polio health worker? Why not someone coming decided that this is your colony, this is your society, you have to chit chat with the family and get friendlier, and then find out what's the issue within the family regarding, is there any person who's dealing with it, because these days both the parents are working, so there's hardly any time. So we need more health workers in this field also.
Okay. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Like she just said that, eradication of polio was because that was a national movement, not only by the public, but also by the private sectors and by the government. We don't have a national policy for suicide prevention.
Exactly.
We don't have a national policy for depression, for schizophrenia, for substance abuse. We have a mental health act, which is very great and it's elaborate, and but for that to move ahead, we need more resources also in terms of money that needs to get put in by the government, by
but for
state
that
governments,
it needs to
by
be a
central
priority.
governments. It needs to be a priority, and what this recent article kind of highlights, that yes, it is a priority, we're just not addressing it the way we should be addressing it.
Okay, so go ahead.
One thing, as ma'am has also said, and we've seen that there's a mandatory psychologist in every school, and that's a government norm right now. I think the same way we also are seeing very high rates of suicide among the adults. So even to address, maybe a psychologist in every corporate setup, a media setup, I don't think that trend has come into India. So if you see abroad elsewhere, they do have mental health professionals in every company.
Yes. True.
So coming from the corporate sector, if we can have some, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, just being there for, because they're constantly multitasking and there's so much pressures and performances, meeting your targets, handling your house issues. Also the issue of men and mental health. We see a lot of men today coming in with anxiety. Earlier, that was not the trend. So I think what we need to address is also men and mental health. It is okay for a man to go down. It is okay for him to feel anxious and low.
Right. So, using what you're saying as a jumping off point, Anand, I'm just going to come to you right after this. Aditi, particularly because, you are well versed, and I mean, all of us are, with content, with what we're putting out there, be it on social media, be it in film, on television. Perhaps that also needs to be part of the change, because this report, unsurprisingly, also talks about how the mental disorder is skewed with more women suffering from it, understandably, but it also has to do a lot with the kind of toxic masculinity and rape culture that we kind of perpetuate in our films, in whatever, how we're behaving at home, because we're all learning from what we're watching and what we're seeing and consuming.
Absolutely. I mean, the time that we spend on social media is humongous, and given that everybody projects the best side of themselves, only the positive things adds to the people who are following the celebrities or influencers, and what doesn't come across is the negative side of life, this larger than life, oh, everything's okay, I'm happy, I'm okay. This kind of a image that is projected definitely plays on people's mind.
Correct.
And where, as one of the participants mentioned, that in corporate sector, men do suffer from, not only men but women as well, suffer from a lot of anxiety, depression, which is kind of swept under the carpet, and this needs to come out. There has to be, and I completely agree when again, she mentioned that there has to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist in-house. So that is the need of the hour. And once you start doing that, automatically people will start accepting the fact that they are going through something, and they have somebody that they can approach who will help them tide over this difficult time or difficult phase that they are facing or going through.
Right, but even positively, if I were to look at that, Ranjini Krishnaswamy, we have a lot of celebrities coming out these days and, you know,
Yes,
talking about depression, talking about, you know, the how it is normalized really. And I think even in the media, just judging from the early 90s to now, how we write about suicide. We don't talk about it as something salacious and scandalous. It is disheartening. We talk about the pain that the family has to endure, what the victim was probably going through. Do you think for children then that serves as an inspiration that, okay, somebody who I idolize like a Deepika Padukone or an Anushka Sharma has come out and spoken about it, so hey, it's not that bad.
Okay, see, at the school level, children normally get stressed out because of, let's say, performances, academic expectations, even how they look, because that's so very important for them, you know. And then there's this constant competition of trying to look better than the other, but this is very normal. Now, unless we tell them, look, it's okay not to be your best, it's fine, just be your normal self. That's number one. Number two, with this increased use of technology, we find that children are getting isolated. So where are the friends? You only have competitors. You don't have really friends.
True.
So as a result, if we had this sort of sensitivity, awareness, and include this sort of empathy and sympathy in the course curriculum, not as a separate subject, perhaps children would be more willing to talk, share, number one. Number two, I've also found that girls are more willing to talk about this. But then what happens is, it says, oh, they're always whining, they're always moaning.
Right.
You know, that's the kind of attitude people say.
Right.
So as a result, if we just looked at, okay, it's just another ailment, it has to be treated, and we look at it in a nice, positive manner, and then after the recovery, as it were, we don't keep pointing fingers and say, you know, this is what happened to her.
I just want to point out.
Anand, I know you've been waiting very patiently. I'm sorry, I haven't come to you. Go ahead, Anand. I'll come to you then, Shraddha.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think first, we have to take authentic responsibility for our health. I think, you know, we talk about resources, and I agree with the points that my colleagues have mentioned here. Resources are important, we need more resources. But the ultimate resource is resourcefulness. And I truly believe I am fully responsible for my mental health. You don't go to a doctor, and it's not a doctor's responsibility to take care of your physical health. It's your responsibility. A doctor is there as a resource to support you. In the same way, psychologists, psychiatrists, coaches, they're all there to support you. But until you take authentic responsibility I'm going to take responsibility for my emotions, for my mind, for all those things, you won't even go to the doctor. You won't even go to the psychologist. You won't even go to the psychiatrist. The first step is really ownership, I think, in this factor. And it was mentioned earlier about kids. I work now with about 300,000 kids from 30 countries. I've done about 150 suicide interventions with kids. And with God's grace, we haven't lost one yet. And we're not going to, because that's my mission. But I tell you this, the craziness of this. I was here in Mumbai, to give you a quick anecdote. At 11 o'clock at night, I get a call, and someone says, come with me. Another kid called me up and said, I need your help. And I went across town, and I went there, and on the roof there was a kid who wanted to jump. And downstairs on the top floor, his parents were sleeping. And I say that to you because here's a kid who was in a lot of pain. And he goes to a school where there are counselors. He has a family home that is well taken care of. All those supports are there. But why is he not able to, at that moment, go to counselors or go to his parents in that moment? Why does he feel alone where I have to stand on that roof and contemplate taking my own life? I say that to you because it's a lot of times we can say we want more resources around them. We have to make them feel like, A, they can come to them, and B, that it's not this bad thing. I'm not feeling good. And I agree with what someone said. Men, I'm sorry, any man watch this right now. If you think your emotions are a sign of weakness, you're an idiot. And I say this right now because we're human beings. And if you're not honest authentically about your emotions, then you're not a real man to me. And I see that because that's, to me, when we can get to that place. And a lot of times what we do is we tell men, and probably even women, just shut up and just stay quiet and repress it. But I'm sorry, actually it's strong to be honest. It's strong to be authentic.
Courageous.
So Shraddha, because, you know,
Yes.
he obviously spoke for the men. And if I may, I'd like to speak for the women here, because that it always ends up being a problem where you don't want to be, especially in a corporate space, be written off as being somebody too emotional, somebody who's constantly worried about whether her child is unwell. But these are legitimate concerns. You know, they can't be brushed under the carpet. There is serious anxiety, and it doesn't mean that women care about their careers any less or are less passionate or less ambitious just because they show emotion.
I think what we need to realize is, as a society, we've been changing. So there's a lot of cultural shift. Earlier, we were living in joint families. Today, we are living in nuclear families. Women are multitasking much more than they did ever earlier. So you're working, you're in the corporate setup, you're taking up leadership, and you have to handle a family home. So I think what we are seeing is women coming forth for help more.
That's right.
Men shying away from that. But I definitely, coming back to your earlier point, movies such as Tare Zameen Pe, we saw a substantial increase in children being detected with dyslexia.
Right.
So if we have awareness on media, we have more movies, we have more shows, I definitely think we are coming closer to achieve our goals.
Okay, so then, Dr. Saida, let me ask you this. Are more people open to therapy than ever before? Because we're seeing millennials report a willingness to talk about mental health significantly more than, you know, your baby boomers and Gen X folks.
Yes, definitely. We can write them off and say they're snowflakes, but they're not. I think that's one of the worst things that we can do, labeling them in a derogatory manner, for that matter. So I work in private setups, and I also work in affordable care setups. And we have a lot of young people, young adults, teenagers and young adults, above 18, who come to us for help directly in the affordable care section. So if you're asking, okay, you know, you could afford, why wouldn't you come in private, is because they don't get that kind of financial help from their family. So they're essentially paying out of their pocket money. If somebody who's in their first job, they don't really get paid that much. Sometimes somebody who's an intern, they don't get paid anything at all. So even though they are more aware and they want to take help, but because the people around them, their loved ones and the people who are supposed to be taking care of them, they're not aware of what happens. That's the reason there's a barrier. What we need to understand is there's mental health issues, and there are mental health disorders. Now, you can have a healthy lifestyle in terms of physical activity and exercises and social gatherings and emotional contacts and relationships. That's a good mental health. You could have a mental health issue, like if it's a temporary thing, that if I failed or if my dog died or something else happened, that could lead to mental health issues that I may or may not need professional help for, in terms of talk therapy or in terms of even maybe a few medications. Then there are mental health disorders. That's a disorder. That's a disorder of the brain, just the way if I have asthma, I have a disorder of the lungs. And what people don't understand is a disorder is not going to get better without treatment. And treatment means medications and therapy. So a lot of people will come and say that, okay, I want help, but I don't want medications. So you don't pre-decide treatment when you come in. A lot of the reasons, again, people don't come is we have no health insurance for mental health. If I am suicidal and I want to be admitted, I have to pay out of pocket. And I can't just go and get admitted in maybe a BMC or a government setup because I might not like it or they might not have beds for me, and I can't afford private. So then I might be standing up on this terrace and maybe hopefully calling a friend, and maybe that friend comes across town and talks me down off the ledge. But that's a big if. So when it all kind of also comes down to awareness and no stigma. The reason that even if corporates have HRs who might be capable of helping you out, they might have employment assistance programs, they don't want to report it in their office that they have mental health issues. Even yesterday I got a text, I'm applying for this job and I want to write that I have depression and I'm on taking medications.
Right.
But my HR has said, don't do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that would be stigmatizing, and you might not get the trajectory of your career is going to get impacted. So stigmas at different levels as well. And when we're talking about education, we need to start talking about education of everyone, including doctors, including medical doctors.
Correct.
I mean, the lack of education at an undergraduate level, an MBBS doctor, about psychiatry and psychology also is ridiculous. So as my first person of defense is maybe a family physician. If my family physician doesn't understand that, okay, I may be going through depression or anxiety, or I may be leading towards substance abuse, I'm binge drinking, or I'm smoking up too much, how is he even going to, or she even going to refer me to a specialist, whether that's for psychotherapy or whether for medications or whatever. And gynacs need to be told about how psychiatry is so important and integral part of a woman's life in terms of their trajectory, because they're going through hormonal changes on a cyclical change on every month.
Absolutely.
So we need to create awareness even in the medical fields, because you'll be surprised how much stigma there is in medical facilities and medical service providers as well. Chemists, you know how a patient of mine just told me that it takes her half an hour to fill a prescription of 3 drugs that I've given her, and because they have to put a stamp and this and that, which is great. I'm very happy that they are following the legalities of everything, but they make it so tough. So she's like, I only go to this one person because he doesn't look at me funny.
Right. So, you know, there's obviously then a lot besides, of course, just beyond the realms of our socio-economic, cultural background, if we may. Rajshri, you know, as somebody now who's probably even more aware of mental health and mental illness after what has happened, I'm sure you must be noticing it, considering you're also a teacher. Amongst the children that you teach in school, even with regards to what's happening in educational institutions, do you think there is seriousness and commitment even at the public or government level?
Yes, there has been. I see it in school where I'm teaching. I see it at home when kids come to me. Definitely, parents are also much more aware than what we were. So it is going upscale, but still a lot has to be done.
Okay, so then let me talk about laws here now, Shraddha, because there is the Mental Health Act that was in fact introduced in 2017, and yes, that is welcome. But then there is also the October 2020 deadline, which essentially says mental illnesses need to be included and at par with physical illnesses in insurance. This is also welcome. But the insurance companies are now having a hard time calculating premium because of lack of data and the provisions in the Mental Health Act, which is also great, but says that past treatment or hospitalization is relevant, but it's not necessarily going to justify future determination. That to me is counterproductive.
Right. I just want to bring in the point of when we're talking about therapy here and we call it talk therapy, I don't think psychotherapy in general, people say, okay, we just go and talk to somebody. What is she going to do? What is he going to do? We need to understand as a society that it's a structured science. Therapy is structured, goal-oriented. It doesn't go on lifelong. So even in terms of insurance and economically handling, you need to understand that you can go into therapy for 4 or 5 sessions and get substantial amount for yourself and still handle your anxiety. If you see, most of our stuff is also online. So you can read, there are podcasts, there's a lot of help available online. So a therapist is just going to be a guide, which is probably like your physical trainer who's going to guide you, or a doctor who's going to handle your fever, you know, and that's when you take it up. So I think in terms of insurance companies, in terms of law, I think we need to have some sensitivity that these can, you know, maybe we can have 3 sessions or 4 sessions or 3 visits to a doctor included as part of the, you know, the plan that they're designing. And as it is in the US, I mean, it's all over the world that part of the therapy is paid for and part of the therapy is not paid for.
Okay. Okay. So, Dr. Saida, then, is there also an issue of shortage? Because I read an article recently talking about India having fewer than 2 psychiatrists for every 1 lakh people, because it's nothing less than than a mental health emergency, honestly, because treatment gap becomes a problem. Like I said, we can sit in television studios, hesitatingly avail mental help, but there are so many patients in India who do not. The majority of India's billion, they don't even live in these parts of the country.
Yes, so like I said earlier on, a psychiatrist in a rural background will be much more burdened in terms of seeing a number of patients in a single day. And he can't or she can't help it, because if she or he doesn't see that patient today, you know, that patient is not going to get seen by anybody. So even if they spend just a few seconds or, you know, sometimes that happens, just a few seconds, because there's no uniformity of psychiatrists or psychologists available. And the more rural that you go, there are lesser number of psychologists or psychiatric social workers or other mental health professionals. We are trying to train the Anganwadi workers and the community health volunteers with at least a modicum of understanding what depression and anxiety is and how to screen it and what possible tips that they can give, and maybe tell them how to reach a resource. But it's not going to be that easy, also because again there is a lot of gyan that a lot of people just hand out. Oh, you should just go meet people, or you should just go shopping, or you should just do something that you like. So that lack of understanding that it's a disorder of an organ of your body, and don't just treat it with triviality. And it could be a long-standing in a chronic illness, or it could come and go in a few years or a few months. So what you need is treatment and symptom relief now, but you also need functionality, which will include coping skills, that in case if you ever have an illness again, this is what you could do to maybe prevent it, and this is what you need to do immediately so that it doesn't escalate again, and that might become again a serious episode. Yes, we need to spread the good word far and wide about mental health, about helps that are available locally or even at a district level. But so when I go to a subsidized OPD, even my family is going to be like, okay, you know, if you're not well, cancel your private appointments, but go to your subsidized OPD. Because if I don't show up because I'm not well or I've taken off and I haven't informed them from before, a person will take leave from their work that day, spend that extra money in traveling to see me, and then not see me again. So that's actually money out of their pocket without really getting the benefit of even a prescription or you know, a gentle hand-holding session either. So we need to understand that it's just not that easy that I reach a psychiatrist. We need to understand how are they reaching a psychiatrist.
Right.
So you know, like in the National TB program, that if you're getting, if you're going to the hospital that day, you're going to get reimbursed even for the work, the salary or the pay that you've lost. We need to do something like that for your mental health as well.
So Anand, you know, of course, you know, using what Dr. Saida is saying, what can the corporates do better? Because let's remember that, you know, it's not that, you know, our company spaces are devoid of any kind of mental illness, mental health issues or mental disorders. Perhaps just like we're always, you know, handing out flyers about what to do when a person has a heart attack, how to give CPR. Maybe we should also be taught how, you know, how to be equipped when it comes to dealing with mental health issues. Also open the doors beyond having a company off-site, one PowerPoint presentation. I know that would be of no interest to any of us here.
I agree 1000%. And I think a couple of things to be aware of here is you can have a nice mental health day and send nice pamphlets around. Everyone feels good, have an offsite.
Right.
But here's the challenge. You go on offsite, everyone feels good for that 2 hours. And then you come back to your boss treating you like rubbish the next day. And it's not just about, sometimes, a lot of times, the people who are actually not feeling good mentally, it's not them. They came there actually fine. The environment around them at work is what caused that. The environment around them is what made them lose their confidence or lose their courage or feel bad about themselves, or they have a boss that's abusive and destroys their self-esteem. So it's important. Mental health is a responsibility of every single stakeholder in this factor. It's not just HR's job to fix this. It's not just the employee's job to fix it. To me, I think every single person who goes into management needs to understand the value of mental health and how to properly guide, influence, motivate, activate your employees, and what has a destructive influence, what has a constructive influence. Otherwise, what happens a lot of times is, yes, people unfortunately have this kind of weird view of productivity. We're not human doings, we're human beings. And with this crazy thing that people come to our work, just because we pay them, we got to get the best results out of them. And that means treat them like rubbish, destroy their confidence, destroy their self-esteem. Well, at least we got results in that quarter. I'm sorry, that doesn't cut it. We have to look at, when we're employing someone, we're employing them as a whole being. And we need to treat their whole being and invest in their whole being, because that's what's going to be with us for a long time. If you want loyalty at work, you cannot just look at your employee's productivity. Look at the happiness. Make that your focus, and trust me, that employee will never leave you. And that responsibility is every single stakeholder's.
Absolutely. Very well said. You know, we're opening the lines now to some callers. The numbers are flashing on your screens. I have Soham Singh, a caller now joining us from Dehradun. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us on Mirror Now. Go ahead.
Good evening, ma'am. You see, this subject itself is a very terrifying, especially for us Indians, because we are not that much advanced. I will agree. The moment the child has got some problem or so, it is the family's problem. They should take care of it. They just try to avoid the child, number one. Number two, the same problem with the schools. The schools are not well equipped with the psychologist. In case some schools have the psychologist and all, they just don't take care of the children. They just go and spend the time with the principal or the vice principal just to ascertain their, or just to, see that their job is strengthened. The third point is, it's a taboo in our society. You see, some child or somebody in the family has got some problem. The moment you say, इसको psychiatrist के पास ले जाना है, अच्छा पागल खाने जाना है, ये पागल के डॉक्टर के पास जाना है, इतने में ही वो पेशेंट जो है हाफ चला जाता है बेचारा. This has to be educated. I don't know what these societies are doing. There are, most of the places, especially in the urban areas and all,
right,
they must have some counselors and all that. We do not have the psychotherapist. We do not have the counselor in the country, maybe in Bombay.
right.
We do not have the psychodrama system also in our country.
But even in Mumbai, I can definitely say that there are some of the finest schools, or they claim that one of the most renowned educational institutions will not necessarily deal very kindly with people or children that are suffering from any kind of problem or disorder. They're very quick to dismiss it. Rajshri, what can we do in educational institutions, or even keeping that aside, to make it better for children, to make it better for adolescents?
I think we should have more health workers. Grassroots level we should have. We should open doors to more health workers. Make the youth only itself working for themselves. They should be educated how to educate another peer or another
Can I say
friend.
something?
Sure.
Yes,
Ranjani, let Rajshri finish. I'll come to you then, Ranjani. Go ahead, Rajshri.
So there is a very
Okay. All right. Yeah.
very few people towards this. They should be see, affordability is definitely a matter. I, being a homemaker, I would definitely think twice. I have to speak per minute when I go to a clinic. Okay, so we should have people coming to us. Just like people, I open doors to other small, any other disease. Why not we train our people for this disease and they come to us, reach out to us, so that this thing is eradicated totally, I think. That's one of my suggestion, I feel.
Okay, Ranjani, go ahead.
Yeah, number one, I think we need to change society's perception of emotional well-being or mental illness, number one. Number two, I think we also need to make our children strong enough to be able to say, look, something's bothering me. Can you help me? And unless you have a very warm, loving, caring home, this will not happen. And in a lot of schools, though there is a perception that schools are very insensitive and they don't take care of their children, I don't believe that's true, because in most schools, teachers become teachers simply because they love children. Okay, and yes, there is a lot of pressure to complete the portion and so on. But I know, having been a principal for 25 years, I know that there are teachers who walk the talk, who've gone home, stayed with children, kept children in their own homes till the child has recovered, got through that tough patch. So I believe once teachers, there's a little component on mental and emotional well-being as part of their training program too, I'm sure things are going to get better. It's not all that bad as we think it is,
I think that's a very good point that ma'am was saying, that if you can have an element of an emotional empowerment, not only for the kids, but also for the staff. So, you know, taking it from the youth, going up to the adults and sort of handling it at each level, you know, because everybody's supposed to have a mentor or a coach.
Yes.
So I think we can start from the youth, go up to the adults, and then go to the corporate. So you're handling all aspects of society.
And I would say, also just want to add one thing.
Right.
I think it's important to go to the youth.
Absolutely.
You know, I saw an amazing thing happen recently. I won't mention the school, but there's a school that had a high level of bullying. And the principal came to me, the counselors came to me, we did a session there, and we found one of the kids being bullied the most. And what the most amazing happened is, when I believe in one phrase, hurt people will hurt people. So if I'm feeling bad already, I'm going to take that out on someone else and hurt someone else. And when we addressed that kid, I asked him, I said, in that moment of pain, have you ever hurt someone?
Yes.
And he said, I have. And he pointed to the kid. And then he went to that kid, and in front of his entire class, the most bullied kid apologized to that kid. 2.5 hours later, I had every single kid in that class, 50 kids in that class, come up one by one and say, I'm sorry I hurt you, I'm sorry I hurt you, I'm sorry I hurt you. And they've now vowed as a class, forget me, forget counselors, forget anyone else, they've now vowed as a class to be a zero bullying class. And to me, when kids can take that responsibility for not just their own mental health, but supporting others, we can create that environment.
Okay, Saida, you wanted to make a point?
So, so when we are talking about educating the children and educating the teachers who are teaching the children, mental health, mental well-being, and a basic understanding of what mental health disorders are has to be part of their curriculum, has to be part of the curriculum of the children as well as the teachers that are teaching them. Indian Psychiatrist Society, we have a lot of task force that are thankfully working on it, and hopefully we're trying to engage with the policymakers to see how we're going to do that. Having said that, like he just said, that, you know, bullying is somebody who's in pain is going to hurt another somebody else. So we always tell, to whether they're little children or bigger children, that a bully has a pain in his brain. And essentially what happens is that we are so focused on the child who is bullied, we tend to isolate them further by the rest of their peers. And we're not really looking at the bully who's also a victim in this aspect. So there's a lot of grassroots level of work that needs to get done on how to handle an emotional crisis of any kind. So that mental health first aid that needs to get taught to everybody, the same way we teach children about physical health first aid, what to do if there's an electric shock, what to do if there's a burn, what to do, you know, wash your hands before you eat. And the basic will start with consent. What we don't realize is, when we're talking to children, if we teach them what consent is, even if it's something that, can I give you a hug, even if it's a toddler in preschool or nursery or play school or you know, kindergarten or something, that also has a huge impact on how the child looks at that child as an individual, as I have an opinion and I have a voice and I have a right to voice that opinion. So the consent is that then is also going to go ahead when we are talking to young adolescents about positive body image or positive sexuality or kind of gender differences and gender roles. That's really going to cement in terms of how I want to be treated and how I'm going to allow you to treat me. So there are a lot of levels that we can do these exercises from the ground level, and hopefully we prevent a lot of psychopathology. We know that half, like if there are 100 people who have a mental illness, half of them, 50% of them are going to get a diagnosis by age 14, and 75% of them are going to have a diagnosis by age 25. So you actually look at it that this is the age that mental illness really happens. And if we don't try to understand that, and we then say that, oh, but medications are actually wrong because they're growing children, I turn around and say that because they're growing children, if there's something wrong and you don't correct it, then that arc of development is forever going to be skewed and a little wonky. So we need to understand at every level, the intervention and the education that is required will be different. But it has to start from ground level.
Okay, I'm sorry to cut you off there, but we have a caller right now who's joining us. He's Munshi, he's joining us from Mumbai. Munshi actually particularly wanted to discuss either with Shraddha or Dr. Saida, considering his wife is bipolar. She's been depressed for the last 3 years. Go ahead. Thank you so much for calling in on Mirror Now.
Yeah, madam. I would like to speak with Dr. Saida.
Yes, please go ahead, sir.
Actually, my wife, she has been diagnosed by mind case Dr. Sajid that she is having bipolar disorder and is prescribed her medicines. Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
So she is on Zodax, Amolive, Certima, Lopez, Mitras, Infalit, and Meth.
Right.
This is a big list of medicines she has been prescribed, and she is not coming out of this bipolar disorder. So I wanted to check whether she will come out or not.
Thank you so much for that question, Mr. Munshi, and I'm really sorry to hear that your wife is suffering, but I'm also very glad to see that you as a spouse and a caregiver is so concerned about her, and you've taken timely help, you've gone to a psychiatrist, you've had an accurate diagnosis. Now, if you have a question about the diagnosis of your wife or the treatment that she's been given, the number of medications or the different kind of medications, what I would strongly suggest is go back to your doctor, just ask them, what are these medications for? What are the positive effects of the medications, and what is it that if there is an adverse effect, what should you look for? The great thing about mental illnesses is that they're curable, they can get better, they're treatable. You may have to, in certain cases, take medications for a long period of time or even for a lifetime. But you know what? So does blood pressure medicines, and even diabetes medicines have to be taken every day. Thyroid medicines have to be taken every day. So whatever medications help you not only become symptom-free, but also functional and a productive person in your own life that's also helping other people, I think that's very important for us to see. Asking your doctor how long is the treatment going to last is also a good question, and the doctor is definitely going to come back and tell you whatever that they know of the case, and depending on what they can, how they can answer it. So go back to your doctor, ask the same questions. Yes, he has given a lot of medications, but some of them could have been that you need to take it only on some certain occasions and some of them on a regular basis. Asking your questions, there is no such thing as a stupid question, there's no such thing as a foolish question. Please go ahead and ask them and you will get your answer. One thing you don't want to do is Google them and then get scared that, oh my God, there's a list of side effects. Every medicine will have certain side effects, but when used judiciously, they're going to do their job and you're going to get better. And you can get better with mental health. You can even live better with mental health if you don't get, you know, in certain cases. So there's a lot of hope out there for mental illnesses and treatments.
I think,
Mr. Munshi, thank you so much for calling in, and Dr. Saida, thank you so much for speaking with him.
Pleasure.
A silent killer, unfortunately, and a growing medical emergency that we cannot laugh off with memes on social media, that we cannot wish away, that we cannot unsee, and certainly cannot unthink. India needs to get mentally well, and we cannot be part of the problem anymore. We have to be part of the solution. The higher burden in children and adolescents in this report in North Indian states is especially worrisome. Is this what we wish for our future generations? Now, we can either look away, as we mostly do, or then truly use these numbers to have further research and understand better and track the changing trends of mental disorders in different parts of the country and what we can do to make India truly fit. Thank you so much to my panel for joining us this evening and to my viewers as well.